I'm Kara Stevens. This is my husband Perry, Walt, and Lumi. And yeah, we just wanted to kind of tell our story. And we're a pretty boring couple. We grew up together. We've known each other since we were born and went to church together. And we dated in high school, got married out of college, and um, you know, figured we'd wait until I got done with law school to have a family, and that seemed like the responsible thing to do. So in 2019, we started figuring out that we were not able to have kids on our own. Um, the doctors recommended IVF right away, and that was just something that wasn't wasn't really on our hearts. We didn't feel like that was a good option for us. Um, we had some concerns with the way it's usually done, and particularly in America. And so we found out about embryo adoption, and we had heard about a family that had an embryo that was frozen for longer than the couple had been alive. And so, yeah, and that was kind of how we found out about it. And so basically, it's another couple does IVF, and they have remaining embryos that they either can't or don't want to transfer. And so they donate them, usually to like a fertility clinic or bank. And then another couple can adopt them. And in America, it's not technically considered adoption. Unfortunately, embryos are still considered personal property here. And so it's more of a legal kind of contract process to transfer them from one couple to another. But we went through a Christian organization, and so they do, see them as humans, as little lives, little image bearers of God. And so we had to go through, the full home study and all of that. But before we got to that, we had just paid our deposit. This was in 2022. In August, we put down our deposit for the adoption, started the process, and in September, 4 days after Perry's 31st birthday, he had a major stroke. And so it was on a Monday. He was off work, but I was not, and we were supposed to meet for his birthday dinner. So he didn't show up, and his parents were there, and I was there. And I looked on our home security camera, which we had actually just gotten for our pets, and we kind of had it like on a really low shelf to just be on the floor. So I looked on the camera, and Perry just happened to be sitting right in front of the camera on the floor. He was basically unconscious. His head was rolling from side to side. And I started saying his name. It had a microphone function, and so I was like, Perry, and he responded to me and was calling out my name. I think he, probably thought I was at home. And so I was at the Pizza Inn on Clinton Highway and immediately called 911, and actually got home, which usually about a 25-minute drive. But I got home before the ambulance got there, and I assumed just by looking at him that he may have had a heat stroke. One side of his face was drooping. He couldn't use his right arm. He couldn't move his legs. He kept saying, I can feel this one, but not that one. He would, point at his left leg and say, I can feel this one, but not that one. And he was pretty incoherent and out of it at that point. So got to UT Hospital, and it was a while before they let me back to see him, which was crazy, because I just didn't know if he was alive or what was even happening. And when they did finally take me back, they said that he had a blood clot out of the blue, and that he had suffered a stroke, and they couldn't give him a clot buster or do surgery or do anything to help him because of where it stopped in his brain. He didn't have any conditions that we knew about, no risk factors that we were previously aware of. And so, yeah, he could say his own name. He couldn't say his date of birth. He couldn't say where we lived. He couldn't say my name. They would ask him, who are you? And he would say Perry. And they would say, well, who is that? And point at me. And he would say Perry. So, he was very limited on speech. Couldn't walk. Couldn't lift his right arm or move his hand at all. So we stayed at UT for a week while they ran tests and tried to figure out what it was. Ends up that it's kind of the perfect storm of genetic clotting factors that he just never had a reason to know about before. And then we got into Patricia Neal, and so he went there for rehab and had to relearn to do everything. I mean, they would show him a fork and he couldn't say what it was for, or a picture of a car, and they would ask, what do you do with this, and he didn't know. And so I say that just to show how far he's come, but at the time we didn't know what life was going to look like, and doctors can't anticipate that. God really is amazing in how he designed the brain, and how neuroplasticity works, and how those new pathways can be made, because they've essentially told us, like, that part of your brain is dead. Like, it won't heal. Your brain will just find new ways to send that information. But even like day one, when it happened, he was quoting scripture and singing hymns. So things that, like, he really had memorized, or especially in song form, he could communicate, because it was in a different part of his brain. But he worked really hard. He did 2 weeks of inpatient therapy, and then about 3 or 4 months of outpatient. And he was very adamant that we were not going to adopt anymore, at least for the time being. He's like, if God blesses us with a child, then great, but I'm not going to choose necessarily to bring a child into this situation, just because he wanted to make sure he could. Okay. He wanted to be able to take care of himself, and obviously a family too. And at the time, he was in a wheelchair, or at least using a cane to get around. And so he was out of work for about a year, and then slowly started transitioning back into the workplace. He had worked at UPS before the stroke, and so obviously couldn't go back to loading trucks. And he was an electrician before that, and so fine motor skills were pretty much gone at the time, so he couldn't do that. So he started cleaning at a church, and lost a bunch of weight, and got fit and healthier even than he was before. And in May of 2024, so almost 2 years later, I had pressured him long enough, kind of, gently saying that desire was still there for me, and I had seen really how far he had come, and I think I had more faith in his ability to be a good dad than he did. But in May, he said, "Okay, we can restart the process," and so we did, and we got approved with our home study and background check, and so we got access to the embryo database and chose a group of 7 genetic siblings who were created and frozen in 1999, so they are true 90s babies. And then in November, sadly, 4 of them did not survive being thawed, but these 2 did. And so we had our transfer in November. They were frozen in groups of 2, and so we knew if both we hoped survived the thaw, and if they did, then we wanted to transfer both of them, and they did. And so a month later, we found out we were expecting twins. Um,
Yep.
Everything was going great. I had no complications at all. Was actually planning a home birth with midwives, and um, it was just a normal twin pregnancy. And at 21 weeks, we decided to do an anatomy scan at UT, just to kind of see where they were, where the placentas were, um, all that. And so the ultrasound tech went over him, um, said everything looks good. She moved on to Lumi because he was A and she was baby B. And so she looks at Lumi and ends with her heart. And I remember her making the comment, "That is such a beautiful heart." And, we're like, "Great, that's wonderful." And she said, "Actually, I really didn't get a very good picture of his heart. So let me go back real quick." She was almost done. Like, I think she had started to wipe the gel off. And she was like, "Actually, I didn't get a great look at his heart. Let me go back." And she did. And we could tell that, her demeanor changed and something was wrong. And she actually said, I don't know what that is, but that's not right. Um, and she pretty quickly left the room. And so we're just kind of sitting there like, okay, what's going on? Um, and so a geneticist comes in, and it just sort of, everything went very quickly from there. And we had a lot of people in and out of the room after that. First, the geneticist, which she didn't know that they were adopted embryos. She was wanting to know, family history and background and things like that. And we're like, we don't have any of that information. We know nothing about their donors, actually. And so, she said, "Well, do you want to do genetic testing?" And we didn't, because it wasn't going to help, with his diagnosis. And we knew that we weren't going to terminate or change, our plans regardless of what it showed. And so doctor came in, and just explained to us basically that one side of his heart did not form. The heart usually forms around week 7, I think. Is that right? Um, and so there wasn't any chance of it developing more or really changing, at least from a medical perspective. And so she said that babies who have this condition, they don't live after birth unless they have a series of complex surgeries. And at that point, she too offered for us, to terminate. And we're like, absolutely not. We're keeping him regardless. And so she set us up with a pediatric cardiologist, and we actually got in within like 2 days, which we were very thankful for, but also kind of showed, okay, yeah, this is a big deal. And so, yeah, they confirmed the diagnosis. It was a little bit different than what they originally thought. His anatomy is very unique. God made him very special, and so he does just have one working chamber, one side, but there are some parts, and I can't even describe it at all, but he has more heart parts than most kids with that condition. So that was something that we were thankful for. But the cardiologist also said, he said, "I'm a Christian, so I'm not going to suggest that you terminate, but it would be very reasonable for you to, just basically let him be born and take him home and love him, and let him pass away, essentially, which would happen at about a week old, if not sooner." They're fine in utero because they have a ductus that stays open, but that closes right when they start breathing oxygen. And so, we were like, no, we're going to do everything we possibly can for him. God trusted us with him, and we believe he has a plan for his life. And so he said, "Okay, well, your options are to go to Vanderbilt or Duke in North Carolina." Yeah. So Vanderbilt or Duke were our options for um, not only having his surgery but also giving birth. And so after we looked at both programs and prayed about it, we felt like we were supposed to be at Duke. And so uh, twins usually come early. And so at 36 weeks, they wanted me to relocate so that I would be there in case I went into labor early. So we stayed at an Airbnb. Perry's work was amazing. That was a huge blessing that he had gotten a job at the airport, and they were super supportive of him. People donated time, and he got to be there with me almost the whole time because we moved the first week of July, and I gave birth the third week of August. So I was 42 weeks. They did not come early. But he was born, and you know, it was pretty much as they told us it would be. He had to have surgery at 10 days old, and they placed a stent. That didn't work, and so the next day he had a full open heart surgery. They placed a shunt in his heart, and he's had some complications since then. He had an infection when we got back home. We've been to Children's Hospital twice since then, and they're amazing. We're thankful for them. He's been back to Duke to have a stent placed in his shunt, and yeah, and that helped a ton. That was in November, and then we're scheduled. He gets his next big surgery in March, and then we'll kind of be out of this, what they call the interstage period, which is the really super vulnerable time, and just have to be overly cautious about everything, kind of quarantine at home. So yeah, we just, you know, he's been through a lot, but it's, I told Perry the other day, he's really encouraging to me. He challenges me, you know, when I feel like I deserve to be in a bad mood or feel sorry for myself. I'm like, look at all he's been through in 6 months, and he still smiles and laughs, and is such a trooper. And so we're just thankful to God for them and the way, you know, he preserved their lives for 25 years. It's crazy to us that human beings can be frozen for decades and just be thawed and still, you know, survive and grow into these precious little humans. But we just feel like God preserved him. And it's pretty amazing to think about how different the outcome could have been if he was born in 1999, because they, you know, they were doing these surgeries, but they weren't nearly as far along, you know, the technology that they have now. They rarely even have to stop their hearts anymore. Duke has been on the forefront of that kind of research, and that's one reason we chose them. But we met with his surgeon the other day, and he said he does 4 or 5 of these a month. And Walt's next surgery is a little more complex because he has 2 of something that he should only have 1 of. But even that, the surgeon was like, yeah, it's fine. You know, I feel good about it, and he's going to be fine. So we're just really thankful the way the Lord has worked in our lives. I mean, it's been a whirlwind the past, you know, 5 years, I guess. And things that we wouldn't have anticipated and wouldn't have asked for, but we wouldn't also trade it for anything, because it's led us to this, and we've been able to see the faithfulness of God and just learn more about his sovereignty and how nothing happens by chance. There's nothing random. And so we're just so thankful for the way he answers prayer. And I'm talking a lot, but I'm actually pretty introverted by nature. But I just like for, you know, people to be able to hear all that God has done, and also to be able to pray for our Walt.
Yeah.